Hey, it's me. So I want to talk to you about giving and receiving memoir feedback. If you take a look under course documents, you'll see that there's a handout called Critique Guidelines, CRW 143 Critique Guidelines. Please make sure that you take the opportunity to go through that before you post any critiques to anyone's essays from this go round or any of the go rounds that we're going to be doing in this class. Um, there's some things that we want to especially keep in mind when we give and receive feedback on memoir. There's always the piece, when you submit your work that you're being vulnerable and that you're putting yourself out there and you've got a group of strangers and, blah, blah, blah. Will they love me? Will they really love me? And all that. We're here in a class format to try to make our writing stronger. And so in order to do that, we have to really practice this notion of detaching from the work itself so that we're able to hear the responses from other readers. That's part of the reason that we've been doing these 10-minute prompts all along. I want you to just practice writing and posting and walking away and writing and posting and walking away. And this is over time going to help train you to not take every word you write as, manna from heaven. They come and go and there'll always be more, so that helps, create a little bit of space between the work on the page and you, because your work is not you. And the way that we discuss a text, we're not discussing, you personally. And so within memoir, the couple of things we want to be really, really careful of. First of all, is we do not ever want to refer to the protagonist in the memoir as the author. So when you're putting your critiques together, don't say, like when you got on the bus in Seattle, when the narrator got on the bus in Seattle. And this is another way to help create some space between the piece of writing and the student. And it makes feedback, easier to hear. Like with all feedback that we do in our creative writing classes, our focus is on the craft. We're wanting to help provide ways of making the craft of the piece stronger. Our job is not to critique the content of the story or the piece. So, again, especially since this is memoir and we're drawing from personal life, some things are not allowed to be discussed. And one of those is the content of the piece. Now, you can talk about ways in which, you might be confused by something that happened, but I don't want to see any judgmental comments about choices that the protagonist in the piece might have made. So for example, a comment that was like, well, if you hadn't done drugs, none of this would have happened. That there's absolutely no place for that. The story is the story, and the author is submitting that, with the intention of getting some responses based on the piece itself, not on any choices that he or she might have made in a life. You can pretty much, bet that these essays and these memoirs we're going to be reading, there's a lot of mistakes that the narrators make. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a story there. So again, our job is not to be a judge on anyone's life or any of the choices that they might have made. And I think if you look at how that might be applied, to your own piece, it'll be easier for you. It'll be easy to see how to avoid that when communicating with others. Some of the questions that I've put on the critique guideline handout are slightly different from the ones that you might be familiar with from some of the fiction classes with me. But I'm trying to help, again, you stay focused on what's actually written on the page rather than what the author, the protagonist should have done or shouldn't have done, or kind of get into that murky arena. Keeping conversation strictly on craft is going to help everybody really be able to grow as writers, and that's ultimately what I want for you. Memoir is asking you to be, exceptionally vulnerable, and most of you don't know each other, and here we are in this virtual space, sharing things we might not have ever even told another person. So we want to really remember that and engage in our primary, methods of communication. We're using compassion, we're using respect, and we're creating a relationship of mutual trust with one another. I do want to also draw your attention to some things in your Barrington book here. In the back, if you haven't taken a look at them yet, in the back there are some guidelines for critique groups, and they start on page 187. And I want to just go through a couple of these just to make sure that you've heard them and paid attention to them. So when your work is on the table, so once your work is in the discussion board, do not say how bad, unfinished, trivial, or unworthy it is. So this is the no disclaimers that we talk about in in-person classes. Your work is your work and you got to walk away from it. The intention or what you might have been trying to do needs to come through the writing, not through any sort of paragraph ahead of time explaining what you're hoping what we're going to get from it. Either we get it from the text or we don't. you want to keep your mouth shut. So when students' critiques begin to come in, don't shoot back with any sort of defensive comments. You can ask for clarification, but basically your job is just to receive. And so if we look at this as a gift exchange, so the writer is giving the gift of the work, the critiquer is giving the gift of a mirror, basically, or of another lens, another set of eyes on the text, and we look at it from that perspective. That will also, I think, help be easier to hear. So when you're putting work out there, I'm hoping you will give us some questions that you'd like us to consider for feedback. This helps to direct the conversation, and it also helps to keep things focused on craft, as well as provide the kind of things that you as an individual author are looking for on your piece. If we were in an in-person class, I'd go around and like, don't talk, don't talk, don't talk. This is not the time for any sort of exchange. You put the work out, you walked away, you received the feedback, you walk away. And then it's your job to integrate the parts that matter and the parts that you think are going to help, and let the rest go. You cannot integrate every piece of feedback. You can't. Neither will you find that every reader is the ideal reader. What I've found just in my personal writing groups, the kind of writers who write work very differently from the way I write are my best readers, because they're seeing things that the readers who already like the style that I write in don't maybe pick up on, because they're already liking it. But someone who prefers a more sparse style, or it's like, yeah, you kind of went on a little bit too long here, or can we get to the move it along, and that's very helpful when you can get people who share different sensibilities approaching a text on the page. So when you're providing feedback to the other students in the class, and this is on page 168, don't criticize in a way that's going to make the writer feel stupid or feel insulted. These are things we really want to make sure that we're able to keep a very clean space open for everybody. Don't make sweeping judgments. This is good, this is bad. The kind of feedback that's valuable is not vast quantities of feedback, but specific feedback. So find that particular area, find that place where there's a really compelling piece of dialogue, or where the setting just really sucked you in, and tell the writer exactly where that was. And if you can, explain what the writer did that really made you feel like you were a part of the story. And then likewise, when you're finding places where you're confused or you're felt thrown out of the piece, be specific about those. Even if you don't maybe know why, the more specific you can be about how a piece is affecting you, the more that's going to help the writer. It's not so much about finding an answer. It's about pointing out places where the dream of the narrative has been interrupted. Don't tell stories from your own experience that the work in question reminds you of. So if you're reading a piece and you had a similar experience to what that author is writing about, it's not about you. It's not your story. It's not your experience in any way. This is that author story. So what you may or may not have done is irrelevant in any way that's going to be of assistance to the author of the piece. Don't assume, and this is what I talked about earlier, don't assume that the I character, quote unquote, is the writer. We want to refer to that as the speaker, as the narrator, some place where we're not calling out the author. Don't try to make major changes, reword in your own words, or impose your own view on the story. So what we're really doing here, and this is a very sophisticated tool, we're diving into the work and trying to see the work as the student put the work out there, and trying to help then make that student's vision better. We're not trying to put our vision of that student's story on the piece. And this is a tricky thing to do, and it's really important. And you'll know when you receive feedback if someone is trying to rewrite your story as they would see it, and it doesn't feel very good, and it's not terribly respectful of the work or of the author. And this I really like this on page 169, do try to believe in the possibilities of each piece. So there's something in there, even if it's not connecting to you right away, there's something in there that is of extreme value to the author. And so respect that and believe in it, even if you can't yet see it. Be as articulate as you possibly can. tell them what moved you, what you can still see or feel, what maybe has followed you around after you put the piece down. I still remember thinking, about the dog that you found at the Humane Society and how, how that relationship, changed your relationship with your father, or, something like that. Those things are also very helpful. The impressions that a piece leaves on a reader are very helpful. So we could be very helpful in our work without being mean, without being judgmental, and without moving in and trying to take ownership of someone else's work. So going back to the gift exchange idea, you're presenting your stories and your essays and your memoir pieces. These are gifts. The students and me are providing new windows into those pieces. Those are also gifts. You don't always like all the gifts that you receive, but if they're given with that intention, with that purpose, then they'll be easier for everyone to see and to accept. So have fun, look at these with open hearts, open minds, beginner's mind, and enjoy, really the magic and amazing things that writing is able to do for each of us. Thanks for listening. This is me going away now.